Have you noticed something about the wisest people you know? They don't talk much, not because they have nothing to say, quite the opposite. They've simply reached a point in life where they understand that not everything needs to be spoken, not every truth needs to be shared, and not every thought deserves an audience. As we grow older, something interesting happens. Our body ages, but not everyone matures in mind. Some people just grow older in years, but their thinking remains as restless and noisy as it was in youth. They still overshare. They still seek validation. They still need to be heard in every conversation, as if silence somehow robs them of identity. But here's the truth. Real wisdom isn't loud. It's quiet. And the quieter you become, the more powerful you are. This isn't about becoming passive or hiding from the world. It's about becoming intentional with your energy. It's about realizing that your peace, your dignity, your inner freedom are too precious to be constantly exposed to noise, judgment, or misunderstanding. The ancient Stoics knew this well. Seneca once said, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings." And Epictetus taught us to guard our thoughts like a fortress, because once released carelessly, they can become weapons turned against us. That's why in today's video, we're going to explore something powerful. 7 sacred things you should never speak of openly, not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting. You see, modern society constantly encourages us to open up, to share more, to express everything. And while there's value in vulnerability, there's danger in overexposure. Let me ask you this. Have you ever shared something deeply personal with someone and later regretted it? Have you ever opened your heart only to have your words twisted, judged, or used against you? Have you ever felt that after speaking too much, you somehow felt less peaceful, less whole? That's not your imagination. That's energy leaking out through unnecessary speech. Stoicism reminds us, what you protect in silence becomes your strength. What you keep sacred becomes your anchor when the world turns chaotic. So if you're reaching a new season in life, if you're entering your 30s, 40s, 50s, or beyond, this message is for you. Because true aging isn't just about wrinkles or gray hair. It's about maturity. It's about emotional mastery. It's about knowing when to speak and when silence says more. The wise don't speak less because they're timid. They speak less because they've learned that. Words carry weight. And truth doesn't need decoration. And dignity lives in discretion. And here's something powerful to reflect on. Just because someone asks doesn't mean you have to answer. Just because you can explain yourself doesn't mean you should. And just because you're feeling something doesn't mean it has to be shared out loud. This is not about secrecy. This is about sovereignty. This is about mastering your inner world so deeply that you no longer need to be seen or validated to feel worthy. In fact, the less you speak, the more people listen when you finally do. Your silence becomes your aura. Your presence becomes your message. And that is the way of the Stoic. So in this video, we'll walk through 7 things you should never share freely, whether it's with co-workers, acquaintances, or even friends. Not to build walls, but to build wisdom. Not to isolate, but to elevate. Not to live in fear, but to rise in clarity. Because every word you choose to withhold becomes a form of inner discipline. And every time you choose peace over validation, you rise a little higher. So, if you've ever felt like you speak too much, or regret how openly you've shared, or if you've ever wanted to reclaim your mental space and emotional energy, then this video is for you. Get ready to rediscover the power of silence, not as weakness, but as strength. Not as withdrawal, but as wisdom. Not as suppression, but as Stoic self-respect. Let's begin. Part 1. The Power of Financial Silence. Let me ask you something most people avoid. How much money do you make? Notice how just reading that question might have made you feel slightly uneasy. Why is that? Because deep down, we understand that money isn't just numbers, it's meaning. It's judgment, it's comparison, it's pride, or shame. And yet, in today's world, we're constantly encouraged to show off what we earn, what we spend, what we drive, where we vacation. Social media has turned financial transparency into performance. But here's the Stoic truth. What the world doesn't know, it can't control. When you talk openly about your finances, whether it's your salary, your savings, your investments, or your struggles, you open the door to 3 dangerous things: judgment, expectation, manipulation. Let's break that down. 1. Judgment. People will begin to measure you through the narrow lens of your income. If you earn a lot, you may be labeled as greedy. If you earn too little, they may see you as lazy or unsuccessful. Either way, your value gets distorted, your character reduced to a number. 2. Expectation. Suddenly, you're expected to live or give in a way that fits their story. Earn a little? Why don't you try harder? Earn a lot? Why didn't you pick up the check? The moment people know your financial reality, they assign roles to you that may have nothing to do with who you really are. 3. Manipulation. And worst of all, the wrong people will try to use that knowledge to their advantage. A friend becomes overly generous until the favor is returned with interest. A colleague suddenly needs help, and before you know it, your wallet becomes a tool in someone else's agenda. Now, Stoicism teaches us to live with virtue, not vanity, to measure ourselves not by wealth, but by wisdom. So what's the Stoic way? Let your lifestyle whisper your values, not shout your bank account. There's no need to declare your financial status. If you're secure, people will feel it through your peace, not your possessions. If you're struggling, you still deserve dignity, and silence can be your shield until you've rebuilt. Let me tell you a true story. There was a man, quiet, unassuming, wore the same clothes every day, drove an old pickup truck. No one suspected he was wealthy, but after he passed, it was discovered that he had donated over $8 million anonymously to local charities, schools, and hospitals. He never flaunted his wealth, never spoke of it. He believed that if the right hand gives, the left doesn't need to know. And in doing so, he lived the essence of Stoic generosity, giving without ego, helping without applause. That man was powerful, not because of his money, but because his values dictated his choices, not his status. Now compare that to the modern habit of showing off. Luxury cars on credit, branded bags masking insecurity. 6-figure income bios on LinkedIn, all noise, all signal without substance. Because here's a tough truth. When you need people to know you're wealthy, you're already poor, emotionally. And that's what Stoicism helps us understand. External wealth means nothing if you lack internal control. A big paycheck doesn't buy self-respect. A flashy house doesn't guarantee inner peace. And when we stay silent about our finances, something beautiful happens. We return to freedom. Freedom from judgment. Freedom from pressure. Freedom from performing. Instead of answering, "How much do you make?" we live a life that quietly says, "Enough. Enough for me." And that's all that matters. So the next time you feel the urge to disclose your income, your investments, or even your struggles, pause. Ask yourself, what do I gain by sharing this? And what might I lose? And remember this Stoic insight. Not everything true needs to be said, and not everything said serves truth. Your peace is worth more than proving your worth, and your dignity doesn't need financial receipts. You don't owe anyone your financial transparency. You owe yourself protection of your boundaries, your values, your peace. Live simply, give generously. Speak quietly, and let the world guess while you focus on what truly matters. Part 2. Why you should keep family conflicts private. Let's be honest, no family is perfect. Behind every smiling family photo, there's a story. Disagreements, betrayals. Silent tension at the dinner table. Maybe you've experienced it yourself. A parent who let you down. A sibling rivalry that never healed. A relative who crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. And when the pain feels overwhelming, the most tempting thing to do is speak. To vent. To tell someone, anyone, about the chaos behind closed doors. But here's what I've learned, and what the Stoics teach us with piercing clarity. Not all wounds need witnesses. Because when you share family drama too freely, you're not just expressing pain. You're inviting the world into your living room. And the world? It doesn't always handle your truth with care. Here's what often happens. First comes the unsolicited advice. People who barely know you suddenly have opinions about how you should fix your father, forgive your sister, or cut off your son. Their words may sound wise on the surface, but they're rarely rooted in your reality. Then comes the gossip. Stories passed from one mouth to another, each version more distorted than the last. Private struggles become public entertainment. And worst of all, the pain you once shared in vulnerability becomes someone else's topic of conversation. And finally comes the emotional leakage. You begin to replay your story over and over. Each time you tell it, you feel raw again, angry again, hurt again. Instead of healing, you relive. Now, I want to make something clear. Talking to a therapist, that's healing. Confiding in one trusted soul with wisdom and discretion, that's strength. But speaking carelessly to anyone who will listen, that's leaking. That's letting the world pollute what you're trying to clean. The Stoics believed in the sacredness of dignity, even in suffering. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, journaled his struggles, but he never turned them into spectacles. He believed that self-control is the root of self-respect, and when it comes to family, silence can be your greatest strength. I remember a story that left a deep impression on me. There was an elderly woman in our neighborhood. She was graceful, soft-spoken, always smiling. People admired her calm energy, the way she carried herself with such inner steadiness. It wasn't until years later, after she passed, that her granddaughter revealed the truth. That this woman had survived a broken marriage. That her children didn't speak to each other for years. That her home, for decades, had been more battlefield than sanctuary. But not once did she speak ill of her family in public. She didn't cover it up with fake perfection, but she also didn't display it for sympathy. She chose to heal in silence. She chose to walk in dignity. That is Stoicism in motion. That is strength disguised as grace. Now you may ask, but what if I need to release the pain? What if staying silent feels like suppression? Here's the difference. Stoic silence isn't repression. It's redirection. It's choosing where your energy flows. Instead of shouting into the void, you write in a journal. Instead of venting to a crowd, you process alone or with one true confidant. You breathe. You reflect. You restore. And most importantly, you protect. Because here's the truth, no one tells you. Once you let outsiders into your family problems, you lose control of the narrative. People will judge your father without knowing his trauma. They'll blame your mother without seeing her sacrifice. They'll mock your brother without understanding his silent battles. In trying to feel seen, you may unintentionally expose those you love to ridicule and deepen the divide. The Stoic solution. Heal privately, preserve dignity, reclaim your power. Let me offer you a reflection exercise. Next time you feel the urge to overshare a family conflict, ask yourself, will this bring clarity or just sympathy? Am I seeking truth or validation? Will my words help me heal or keep me stuck? Most of the time, the honest answer is, I just want someone to feel what I'm feeling. But the path of growth isn't always loud. Sometimes the most powerful healing happens in the quiet. So no, this isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about honoring your pain in a way that doesn't exploit it. It's about protecting what is sacred, even when it's messy. Your family may be flawed, but that doesn't mean their brokenness needs to become public property. In the end, silence isn't weakness. It's a form of mercy, mercy for yourself, and for those who may never say, I'm sorry, but who still deserve privacy. Protect your peace. Honor your story, and never forget, the loudest strength is not the one that screams, it's the one that survives quietly, with dignity intact. Speak your truth when necessary. But never let your pain become someone else's entertainment. That's the wisdom of the Stoic. That's the power of restraint. Part 3. Regret is a teacher, not a tattoo. Regret is one of the most powerful emotions a human being can carry. It keeps us up at night. It plays on loop in our minds, whispering, what if I had just... And in our weakest moments, it tells us we'll never be free from it. That's why so many people feel the urge to talk about it, to confess, to explain, to overshare. It's human. It feels like release. But here's what most people don't realize. When you overshare your deepest regrets, you don't always get healing. Sometimes you get judgment. And worse, people remember what you wish they'd forget. They store it. They wait. And in moments of conflict or envy, that vulnerability becomes ammunition. Have you ever shared something deeply personal? A moment you weren't proud of? A decision you still carry guilt over? Only to feel exposed later. Not because the person used it against you directly, but because something in the way they looked at you changed. That shift, that quiet distance, it cuts deeper than words. That's why the Stoics taught us a powerful lesson. Regret is not meant to be broadcast. It's meant to be studied. Privately. Let me say that again. Regret is not a tattoo. It's a tool. It is not your identity. It is not your shame. It is a mirror, showing you what needs refining, not defining who you are. The moment you treat regret like a permanent mark, you trap yourself. But when you treat it like a lesson, you evolve. And that's what separates the wise from the wounded. There's a man I met years ago who taught me this without ever saying the words. He was calm, balanced, one of those people who never seemed shaken by the storms of life. One evening during a quiet walk, I asked him, "Have you ever made a decision you truly regretted?" He paused. Then he said, "Yes, and I carry it every day." Not like a weight, but like a compass. He never went into detail. He didn't need to. Because his lesson was already clear. Share the lesson, not the wound. You see, when we share regret recklessly, especially in moments of raw emotion, we risk making our pain someone else's entertainment, or worse, their weapon. The world doesn't always know how to handle your darkness with care. Some will pity you. Some will judge you, and some will hold it over your head. So what's the Stoic way? It's not silence out of shame. It's silence out of strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote pages of self-reflection in his journals about his mistakes, his doubts, his flaws. But he didn't publish them to the world. Those writings were for him to wrestle with, to learn from, to rise above. The Stoic mindset isn't about hiding your regret. It's about mastering it, not for show, but for growth. Ask yourself this: when you speak of your regrets, are you offering value or seeking validation? Yet, are you helping someone avoid the same path, or are you just reopening your own wound? Are you building connection, or simply bleeding in front of people who can't stop the flow? There's a difference between transparency and emotional leakage. Transparency says, here's what I learned from what I've lived. Leakage says, here's my unresolved pain. Please fix it for me. And the truth is, most people can't. They're not equipped. They don't have the context, the compassion, or the capacity to hold your history with wisdom. But you do. You are the author of your past, and you decide whether your regrets become anchors or arrows, weights that hold you down, or tools that point you forward. So yes, own your past. Be honest with yourself. Learn from what broke you. But don't overshare it with people who haven't earned the right to your full story. And if you do choose to speak, speak with purpose. Tell the truth in service of someone else's growth, not your own relief. Tell it when the pain has become wisdom. Tell it when the scar is closed, not when the wound is still bleeding. That is how you honor your journey. That is how you rise above it. You are more than the sum of your regrets. You are the wisdom they carved into your soul. So use your past, not as a crutch, but as a compass. You don't owe your story to everyone, but you owe yourself the strength to rise above it. Remember, speak when it builds, stay silent when it protects. That's not cowardice. That's clarity. That's Stoic strength. Part 4. Loneliness is a season, not a sentence. Let's talk about something that many people feel, but few are willing to admit out loud. Loneliness. Not the kind where you're simply alone, but the deeper kind. The kind where you're surrounded by people, yet still feel unseen. The kind where silence feels loud and presence feels distant. In moments like these, we often want to reach out, to confess it, to say, I'm lonely, hoping that someone will understand, offer comfort, or simply listen. But here's a Stoic truth the modern world has forgotten. When you reveal your deepest loneliness to the wrong person, you don't find healing, you hand over power. You expose a tender part of yourself to someone who may not hold it with care, and what you hoped would bring connection might lead to pity, judgment, or even manipulation. Let's explore that. When you tell someone you're lonely, especially in a moment of emotional vulnerability, a few things can happen. 1. They may pity you, and while that may sound harmless, pity often makes you feel less than. It places you beneath them in the emotional hierarchy, like a project to be fixed rather than a person to be respected. 2. They may judge you. Loneliness is still wrongly seen as weakness by many. Some will assume you're lonely because you're flawed, or because you've somehow failed at connection. 3. Or worst of all, they may exploit you. They might use your loneliness to manipulate your decisions, to control how you spend your time, your attention, your energy. Because when people sense emotional hunger, some feed it with control, not compassion. But Stoic philosophy offers us a different path, a quiet, powerful, liberating path. The Stoics didn't run from solitude, they embraced it. They saw time alone not as exile, but as education. Epictetus once said, It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. And solitude strips us of illusions. It forces us to sit with ourselves, to confront our truth, to ask hard questions like, who am I when no one is watching? What do I chase, and why? Is my loneliness a signal or a doorway? You see, there's a profound difference between being lonely and mastering solitude. Loneliness is pain. Solitude is power, and the transformation between the two doesn't come from talking about it constantly. It comes from working through it quietly, intentionally, with discipline. There's a woman I once knew, retired, living alone, no family nearby. People assumed she must feel isolated, but she never said a word about it. Instead, she used her solitude to mentor young women in her community. She spent mornings in quiet reflection, afternoons in nature, evenings reading or journaling. She wasn't lonely. She was anchored. And years later, when someone finally asked how she dealt with living alone for so long, she smiled and said, "I made peace with myself. That was the only company I ever truly needed." That's what the Stoics call self-sufficiency of the soul. Now, I'm not saying you should never share how you feel, but timing and audience matter. Don't hand your emptiness to people who only know how to observe, not hold. Don't expect the world to solve what your own spirit must strengthen. Instead, treat loneliness like a sacred fire. Sit with it. Study it. Let it teach you how to be still, how to listen inward, how to rebuild from the inside out. Because here's the truth. Your greatest breakthroughs won't come in the crowd. They'll come in the silence, in the stillness of your room, in the moments when no one's checking in, when it's just you and your breath and your thoughts and your presence. That's where transformation begins. And one day, when you've learned how to be okay alone, you'll carry a peace that no one gave you and no one can take away. You'll become the calm in the storm, the grounded one in the chaos, the person who no longer fears being alone, because they've already met themselves fully and refuse to run. That is the Stoic mastery of solitude. If you feel lonely right now, don't rush to escape it. Sit with it. Learn from it. Use it to build your emotional backbone. And remember, you're not empty. You're becoming whole. The ones who survive this world with grace are not the ones who are always surrounded, but the ones who have made peace in solitude. So, the next time loneliness visits you, don't run from it. Welcome it. Train with it, and walk away stronger. If this message resonated with you, let silence become your strength, not your suffering. Tap the like button if you've ever learned something valuable in solitude. And don't forget to subscribe. This channel is your quiet corner for wisdom, peace, and power. Part 5. Why you should keep your future plans quiet. We live in a world that rewards noise. Share your goals. Declare your dreams. Manifest it out loud, they say. Post your vision board. Announce your new routine. Tell the world what's coming. But what if I told you that speaking too soon about your future plans can actually sabotage them? Let's be real. How many times have you shared a new goal, maybe with a friend, a colleague, or even online, only to feel a sudden sense of satisfaction, like you'd already achieved something? That feeling is deceptive. It's called false progress, and it's the enemy of discipline. When you speak too early, your mind gets tricked into thinking you've already taken real steps. You feel validated, praised, maybe even admired. But the goal? It hasn't moved an inch. And worse, by making your plans public, you now invite 3 dangerous forces: distraction, doubt, and energetic interference. Let's break that down. 1. Distraction. Once people know what you're working on, the pressure to perform can replace the drive to improve. You start thinking about how your work looks from the outside, instead of focusing on building something meaningful. 2. Doubt. Some will question your vision, not because it's flawed, but because it challenges their comfort. They'll say, "That's too risky," or "Do you really think that'll work?" And if you're not careful, their doubt becomes your delay. 3. Energetic interference. This one's subtle but real. Every time you talk about your plan, you're expending mental energy. And that energy should be going into doing, not declaring. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Don't talk about who you're going to become. Become them. Don't talk about what you're going to build. Build it. Because when your results speak, your mouth doesn't have to. Let me tell you a story that still inspires me to this day. There was a quiet architect, not famous, not flashy, just quietly working day and night on a dream. He never bragged. He never told anyone what he was building. But while others were busy pitching and posting, he was pouring blueprints, learning business, refining code, making mistakes in silence. And then, boom. One day, a fully functional startup launched. Elegant, effective, game-changing. No one saw it coming. And that's exactly why it worked. Because while others were busy talking about it, he was busy doing it. This is the power of silent momentum, of building in the shadows, of letting your discipline be invisible until the result becomes undeniable. So ask yourself this: do you want applause now or respect later? Do you want to impress or impact? Are you sharing to feel motivated or because you're already moving? There's a profound difference between ambition and action. Ambition talks, action moves. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't have goals. It doesn't mean you isolate completely. But it does mean you choose your confidants wisely. If someone is directly involved, your business partner, your mentor, your spouse, speak with them, strategize, align. But the rest of the world? Let them find out when the doors open, the lights turn on, and the work is already done. The Stoics taught us not to chase validation. They reminded us to pursue virtue, consistency, and impact, not likes, not attention, not premature praise. So if you've got a vision right now, something deep inside you, guard it, protect it like a seed. Because when a seed is first planted, it's vulnerable. It doesn't need noise, it needs nurture. It needs roots before reach. And when it grows strong enough, it will rise above the soil on its own terms. And people will look up, wondering where it came from. That's the way of the Stoic creator. That's the silent builder. That's the man or woman who doesn't just say what they'll do. They do it. And then let the results introduce them. Don't let your plans become public too early. Not because you fear judgment, but because you honor your focus. You owe your dream discipline. You owe it silence. You owe it the space to grow without interference. So speak only to those who build with you. And let the rest see the final product, not the blueprint. Remember, the loudest plans often fade, but quiet work echoes for years. If you're building something in silence, you're not alone. This community values action over noise. Tap, like if you've ever kept your goals close to your chest. And subscribe for more Stoic wisdom to help you master the internal game so you can win in the external world. Part 6. Why the wealthiest minds keep their net worth private. Let's be honest. We live in a time where net worth is worn like jewelry. It's not enough to be successful. You have to show it. You have to post it. You have to wear it on your wrist, drive it down the street, or drop it into conversations like breadcrumbs. But here's the question no one stops to ask. At what cost? Revealing your exact income, your financial status, or even your material possessions may seem like a harmless flex, or even a motivational gesture. But too often, it becomes a trap. Let's talk about why. When you tell people how much you earn, what you own, or how much you've saved, you don't just share numbers. You shift the dynamic. You change the relationship. Suddenly, you're no longer just a friend. You're the rich friend. You're no longer the co-worker. They're watching your every move for signs of privilege. You're no longer the sibling. They expect you to pick up the bill or fund the next family emergency. Money changes the conversation, sometimes silently, always deeply. And the moment you expose your financial life to the wrong people, you open the door to 3 silent poisons: jealousy, entitlement, misunderstanding. Let's break those down. 1. Jealousy. Even people who love you may begin to resent you. Not openly, not with words, but in quiet comparisons, passive comments, emotional distance. Your wins become their insecurities, and your relationship becomes strained. 2. Entitlement. People begin to expect more from you. They don't ask if you can help. They assume you should. You become the unspoken safety net, the backup plan, the one who has enough. And suddenly, your success isn't yours. It's owed to others. 3. Misunderstanding. Most people assume that wealth equals ease. They don't see the risk, the anxiety, the sacrifices, or the sleepless nights. They see the outcome, not the journey. And so they minimize you, judge you, or worse, try to exploit you. That's why the Stoics warned against becoming attached to image. They taught that true wealth isn't in what you show, it's in what you can hide. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire, wore simple clothes. He ate modest meals. He never needed applause to validate his power, because he understood something most people never learn. The less people know about your material life, the freer you are. Let me tell you a true story. There's a man I know, early 60s, soft-spoken, drives an older Toyota, wears jeans and simple sneakers. To most, he looks like a regular guy. But he's worth over $7 million. He built his business slowly, with integrity. He lives modestly. He gives generously, but always anonymously. And most people in his circle have no idea what he's worth. And here's the thing. Because he lives quietly, he lives peacefully. He's not worried about being targeted. He's not drained by requests. He's not surrounded by fake admiration. He's respected, not because he's wealthy, but because he's wise. That is Stoic freedom. It's not about being afraid to share. It's about choosing when to speak and to whom. It's about valuing peace over praise, clarity over clout, freedom over flex. So ask yourself, what do I gain by sharing my financial status? And what do I risk losing? Privacy, respect, energy. Because once you say it out loud, you can't take it back. And from that point forward, you no longer control how people see you. They project. They assume. They calculate your worth not by your values, but by your bank account. Now, you may say, but what if I want to inspire others? Here's the answer. Let your values inspire. Let your integrity inspire. Let your work ethic, your consistency, your humility be the thing that lifts others, not your income. Because here's a Stoic truth few ever speak. The greatest flex is peace of mind. The real power is being able to walk through the world without having to prove anything. Your life should feel wealthy, not just look wealthy. You should be rich in boundaries, not just bank balances. Rich in presence, not pressure. Rich in calm, not chaos. So, protect your financial privacy, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Not because you're hiding, but because you're guarding your freedom. You don't owe anyone your net worth, but you owe yourself peace. And in a world that's obsessed with showing off, being silent about your success might just be your biggest strength. Part 7. The most powerful thing about you doesn't need to be explained. People can see your strength. They notice the way you walk through chaos with calm, how you stay composed when others unravel, how you smile with grace, even though life hasn't always been kind to you. And that strength, it draws attention. It stirs curiosity. It makes others wonder, what's your secret? And that's when the questions start. What made you this way? Tell me what happened. Where does your strength come from? But here's a truth that most people won't tell you. Not everyone who asks wants to understand. Some ask to admire you, but many ask to deconstruct you, to figure you out, to copy you, or worse, to find a weakness in your armor. That's why Stoic wisdom reminds us, the soul is sovereign, not for display, not for applause, not for explanation. Your strength is not a marketing pitch. It's not a story you owe the world. It's not content for someone else's curiosity. Your resilience was earned. It was forged in private, in moments no one saw. In battles you never posted about, in silent nights of struggle, heartbreak, doubt, and healing. And when someone asks, where does your strength come from? You don't have to explain. Not because you're hiding anything, but because some truths are sacred. They're meant to be carried, not shared. Let me tell you a story that shaped the way I see this. Years ago, I met a woman, quiet, poised, deeply grounded. There was something about her presence. She didn't speak much. But when she did, people listened. Not because she demanded attention, but because her energy felt earned. Eventually, someone asked her, "You're always so calm. Have you always been like this?" She paused, smiled softly, and said, "Let's just say life gave me plenty of chances not to be, but I chose otherwise." No details. No drama. No need for anyone to get it. And that's when I realized, the most powerful people don't tell you what they've been through. They show you in how they live, in how they speak, in what they no longer react to. That's the Stoic way. You don't broadcast your pain to prove your depth. You carry it with dignity, because true strength doesn't need a spotlight. It shines on its own. Now, maybe you've been through things others can't even imagine. Maybe you've survived betrayal, illness, war, grief, abandonment. Maybe your strength was built through tears, not triumphs. And maybe, just maybe, some people think you're cold or distant because you don't talk about it. That's okay. You don't need to, because here's the danger. When you explain your strength too openly, people start treating it like a formula. They try to copy the results without respecting the cost. They want your calm, but not your chaos. They want your power without your process. And sometimes, if they can't imitate you, they'll try to invalidate you. They'll say you're lucky, that you don't understand, that you've never been through what I've been through. Because if they can't explain how you became strong, it threatens their excuses. That's why protecting the source of your strength is essential. not from a place of secrecy, but from a place of sovereignty. The Stoics understood this. They believed the soul was private territory, a place where battles are fought and won, not for display, but for mastery. You don't owe your pain to public view. You don't need to prove the depth of your scars to validate your wisdom. You just need to live in a way that reflects your growth. So here's a question worth reflecting on. Do you share your story to inspire or to be seen? Share. Are you offering truth or asking for recognition? Does the world need to know, or are you giving away sacred ground? There's nothing wrong with sharing your journey. Sometimes it changes lives. Sometimes it heals others. But never forget, you get to choose when and how. Your pain isn't public property. Your strength isn't a press release. Your peace isn't a performance. And when you guard your soul, when you hold your silence, you gain something few people ever taste in this noisy world. True power. The kind that doesn't ask for understanding. The kind that doesn't seek validation. The kind that just is. You've been through things that only you truly understand. You've earned your resilience. You've built your peace. Don't let curiosity steal your sacredness. Don't let attention dilute your depth. Be like the war survivor who walks in peace, but never speaks of the battlefield. Be like the quiet storm, steady, strong, undisturbed, because the most unshakable strength is the kind no one sees coming. As you get older, something shifts inside of you, not just in your body, but in your soul. You begin to see things differently. You begin to feel less urgency to explain yourself, less desire to be understood by everyone. You realize that power has never been in how much you say, but in how much you can withhold. You stop volunteering your pain for validation. You stop broadcasting every scar like a badge. You stop narrating your story to people who aren't even listening. And in that stillness, something remarkable happens. You begin to protect your peace, not because you're hiding, but because you've earned it. The world will always tempt you to speak, to share, to confess, to perform your strength, to defend your silence, to justify your path. But the wisest souls know, peace doesn't beg to be understood. It simply is. Think about that. When you walk into a room and say nothing, but your presence is felt, that's power. When you choose not to react, not to prove, not to engage, that's mastery. And when you carry your wisdom quietly, without needing to be admired or applauded, that's freedom. There's a kind of wisdom that only time can teach you. It's the wisdom that teaches you not everything needs to be shared, that some truths are meant to stay between you and the silence, that each secret you carry is not a prison, but a perimeter, a boundary, a protection, a sacred space where your soul remains yours. Stoicism has always pointed us to this truth. Marcus Aurelius never posted his meditations to gain followers. Seneca didn't publish essays to chase fame. They wrote in silence, for clarity, for self-mastery, for virtue, because they understood what modern culture forgets. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to be seen to be valuable. You don't have to be understood to be at peace. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, I wish I'd said less? Have you ever opened your heart too quickly and felt the sting of regret afterward? Have you ever looked back and realized the most peaceful moments were the ones where you kept something for yourself? That's not coincidence. That's your inner wisdom, asking you to guard what matters. Because not every lesson needs to be taught aloud. Not every scar needs to be shown, and not every part of you belongs in public. Some parts of you are sacred, Let them remain that way. In a world that's loud, reactive, and desperate for attention, be still. Be the calm in the storm. Be the voice that doesn't shout, but resonates. Be the person who doesn't need to prove anything, because your life already speaks for itself. Your actions, your energy, your choices. They're louder than words ever will be. So what is the final wisdom? It's simple, but not easy. Speak less, hold more. Hold your vision, hold your healing, hold your truth, not to hide it, but to honor it. Let your life, not your lips, tell your story. Let your discipline, not your declarations, show your power. Let your stillness speak louder than your speech ever could. Because a quiet soul is not an empty one. It is full. It is sovereign. It is untouchable. So wherever you are in life right now, whether you're rebuilding, rising, or resting, remember this. You don't owe the world your every thought. You don't have to narrate your every step. You can move in silence and still make impact. You can heal in silence and still grow strong. You can speak only when necessary and still be heard in every room you enter. You're allowed to keep your depth to yourself. You are allowed to hold your story like a treasure, not a burden. You are allowed to let peace be your reward, not performance. So the next time you feel the pull to explain, pause. Breathe and ask yourself, is this for growth or for approval? Because growth is quiet. And the soul, once it's steady, no longer needs to shout. If this message resonated with your journey, if you've learned the strength of silence, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel where we explore the inner world that few are brave enough to master. This is your space for Stoic wisdom, quiet clarity, and powerful transformation.